on behalf of the University of East Anglia, I'd like to welcome you all very warmly indeed to this evening event, which is not only launching the film, but most importantly, connecting the people involved in the making of the film and paying a tribute to all of you and to Eylem Atakav and Carolina Pelican, who created this fantastically powerful and effective film. I've just been rewatching it, and it is very moving indeed, extremely humbling, actually, the work obviously that you've all been engaged in for years, but most intensely over this recent period. So I really look forward to hearing you comment on that work and engage in conversation with us and with each other over the coming hour and a half. I'd also just like to point out that this is just an amazing example of the interdisciplinary work at University of East Anglia that we really celebrate and support. The coming together under very difficult circumstances and cutting across different areas and subjects, which can be incredibly challenging because of various different processes and systems and so on and so forth, but it's born out of an utter conviction, belief and set of passions from all of those involved. And of course, it's also a project of urgency. It's a project of great urgency given the subject matter and given all the work of the people involved. So with that kind of notion of urgency in mind, I'm going to hand over right now to our next speaker, to the person who will be properly introducing this event, our Member of Parliament, Jess Phillips, who is here to do just that, I believe. I wonder if Jess is here and would like to come on camera as I introduce you. Jess is here. Brilliant. I'm sure needs no introduction. Labour MP for Birmingham Yardley, our Shadow Minister for Domestic Violence and Safeguarding, contributor, thank you, to this film and doing incredible work in this area. So thank you, Jess, and I'll hand over to you now.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me all right? My internet is always a bit dodgy for some reason. I don't know why. I'm in the second largest city in the country. So it's a great pleasure to be here this evening and to introduce this film, this documentary. I think that during the COVID-19 crisis, when I was first talking to the sector in March, there was this real spirit of the Blitz sense where everybody was going to pull together, and we were thinking of different ways of how we could do things, different partners that we might not have worked before. And we knew that there was going to be a severe and increasing risk and a severe and increasing workload. And we wanted to look at different ways to do things in a different time. And there was a real energy and a real spike in innovation. And that has continued. However, when I recently had a similar roundtable and conference calls with the sector at the beginning of lockdown part 2, I could see on the faces of all the people who had previously been there ready for the fight. I could see the tiredness, I could see the weariness, I could see the pain of having to be support workers in their own homes. I could see that having to lobby the government, having to fund their services, having to deal with an increasing crisis in both service and in people's lives was really taking its toll. And very rarely when we were out clapping for key workers on a Thursday night were the people in our country thinking about these workers. And so that is why it's so important that this film speaks to some of their experiences and talks about what this has been like for them. I believe I've been asked to introduce the two brilliant filmmakers, and they are Eylem Atakav, who's a professor of film and gender and public engagement at the School of Art, Media and American Studies, and worked with parliamentarians, charities and police forces across the UK on issues related to gender-based violence. Her previous documentary, Growing Up Married, tackled child and forced marriage in Turkey, an issue she's also investigated in the UK, contributing to debates on the child marriage bill in Parliament. Carolina Pelikan, co-director of Lifeline, is an award-winning German-Peruvian documentary filmmaker. I'm always really jealous of people with like considerably more interesting heritage than my own. I am from Birmingham. Both of my parents are from Birmingham. I'd like to be German Peruvian. The films of her production company, Pelican Pictures, focus on social injustice and inequality, films for educational purpose, violence against women, and LGBTQI rights. Carolina founded the award-winning empowerment project Empoderat, a series of film workshops for women from disadvantaged regions in Peru. They are our filmmakers who worked together to make what we're going to see tonight.
Thank you very much, Jess, for this introduction. That's very, very kind of you. And I would like to invite Carolina as well to turn the camera on. And hello, everyone. And thank you very much for joining us. And thanks, Sarah, for the introduction as well. It's great to have you all here. And Jess, may I just say thank you for showing up, not just for tonight, to the event, but showing up to support all the sector, all your colleagues as well at all times. And thanks for showing up in the film as well. That means a lot, and that has meant quite a bit for everyone who were involved in the project, not just those who appeared featured in the film, but the larger project whereby 27 people were interviewed between end of June, beginning of July till essentially September time. And I've been looking at the list of participants, which is great. We have quite a few numbers, 66 people. That's pretty amazing for an event where online events have been running forever and all the time. And I've been adding everyone who's contributed to the project as presenters so that they could say a word as well. Sadly, Collaborate does not have the means to screen an 18-minute or be it 3-minute film, unfortunately. And I'm hoping that everyone involved in here has seen the film already. And I will encourage everyone to write comments, to ask questions, and so on. But if the way in which we wanted to structure this was to ask everyone who contributed to the film to say a few words about their current experiences, about the impact of lockdown 1 and 2 perhaps, and so on. I have a list of everyone who's very kindly agreed to say a few words today, and they're in the presenters section as well. But I can see that our really the star of the film is Gina Pruitt from Aurora New Dawn. I think she's currently on a shift as we speak, and she very kindly just popped out of her shift, waiting for calls to say some words and to say hello to us all, and you will have seen it. And I cannot see Carolina here at the moment, but I will ask her.
I'm here.
Oh, you are here. There she is as well. So this is my amazing co-director, and I don't think the film would have come to life without her being here and believing in the work, and all the 27 interviews. And those of you who have done the interviews will know that they were at least half an hour each, if not longer. And Carolina came in and really embraced all those and edited the film in the most beautiful kind of way. So Carolina, did you want to say something before we ask Gina to say a couple of words?
Very, very quickly, because I would love to hand over the word to Gina. Yeah, thank you very much, everyone, for coming. It's really, really exciting to see that many people interested in the film, because I know that we've all been overwhelmed and kind of tired as well from lockdown and COVID. And I mean, especially the challenges that the domestic abuse sector had to confront in this time. I think it's really, really important, and I feel very, very humbled and honored to have been part of this little adventure of making a film during lockdown with no means in that sense, except for a lot of Zoom interviews. As we just mentioned, I feel like it's the first time I actually meet and see some of the contributors, which is really nice, because I kind of feel that I know all of you through the interviews, some of them even 1 hour or even longer. Yeah, and it was a really, really exciting experience. Unfortunately, as it is always with film and documentary filmmaking, not everyone can make it into the final cut, even though we would have loved to include all of the interviews. But I really, really hope that everyone who saw the film can kind of relate to what our expert contributors said, and also what Gina and Shelley, the two voices of the key workers working in the domestic abuse sector, had to say, and their experiences they kindly share with us. So thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you, Carolina. Thank you so much. So without any further ado, because this is an opportunity for us to celebrate the amazing amount of work that everyone has put in to help others and be there for others during one of the most challenging times we've ever, as humankind, have experienced. So Gina, if you are there, please feel free to turn your camera on if you wish. It would be great for you to say a few words about how you are. And in fact, that was the main question I've asked everyone: how are you, in the interviews? And all I got was the passion that they had for the job that they were doing. So they were talking more about the job rather than themselves. So Gina, would you like to come in?
Hello, I don't know if it's working. I've had issues logging in, so apologies. Yes, as mentioned, I'm on shift, so if I have to escape, I apologise. Yeah, I'm okay. I'm tired now, but it's nearly Christmas, which actually in this sector can be both ways. But yeah, with this film, it's been a journey, really. It goes back to an email of, being copied into an email between yourself and Shona, my CEO of Aurora New Dawn, and ask if I wanted to be involved, and Zoom interview and calls and, exchanges of emails, of clips, and here we are. So yeah, I feel very, very lucky to be involved along with everybody else in it, and just highlight the work and, the impact in this sector, because as mentioned earlier, I think when we were clapping, it was forgotten. Actually, there's another whole sector here that have been pushing through all this. So yeah, thank you for having me involved, really, and thank you for everyone being here.
Oh, absolutely, Gina. It's been an immense pleasure, and I mean that wholeheartedly, and so does Carolina. And you essentially, throughout this process, you've also become a bit of a filmmaker yourself, thanks to else that we had to do. But your contribution to the film has definitely changed the tone and the nature of it, and all the experts in the sector just added their comments into the actual practice, work in practice that you were doing, and you are a lifeline, with what you are doing, and that's the quote from your interview. It's not just a job, really, for you, is it?
No, absolutely not. It's more than that. Wouldn't be doing it, I don't think, otherwise. It's so hard, and actually, yeah, it's not just a job at all.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So we don't want to keep you long, but please do stay as long as you can and join in the conversation and so on. But you mentioned Shona. I've got a whole list of people here, and I did put them all in alphabetical order, to be fair. But you mentioned Shona, and I thought it would be a good way of bringing Shona in at this point, who was second in line before Jessa Sato. I'll come back to her in a second, but thank you, Gina. So Shona Dillon is CEO of Aurora New Dawn, which Gina also works for. Shona, it's been great to have you on board the project. So would you like to say a few words about your current experiences in the sector, your reflections on lockdown 1, lockdown 2, and where we are now?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for letting us be part of the film, really. It was probably the first time that I ever sat down during lockdown 1 and expressed how things were, because we all ask each other, you okay? But it's always in that kind of busy sort of, yeah, I'm fine, you know, next case sort of thing. So it's a really cathartic experience. I'm sure that you should probably be paid for counselling as well as as well as making a film. So lockdown 1 was obviously very difficult, as you know, as the film sort of depicts, and as we moved into lockdown 2, I think it was like with most things, you kind of lurch between one crisis to another. And certainly personally, at the beginning of September, I think I realised in my head that I'd got to a stage where I was like, yeah, we'll just get to September and we'll be fine. You know, it'll be fine. We'll you know, we'll get back to doing certain things, and that didn't happen. So we had another kind of a moment of sort of feeling really flat and tired, and checking in with the team. And as a chief exec, you know, I think one of the things that I worry about the most is the team and how they're feeling, and I can't reach them. I'm through a screen. That doesn't feel the same, and it's one of the things that I would like to say that the film has done, because we sent it out to the team, was actually that's born a sense of real solidarity with between ourselves, but also just knowing that there are other women out there working, doing exactly the same thing right across the country, and that's been really important for all of us. So it has brought a lot of positivity to sort of, it's okay, we're one whole sector that we can do this, albeit that it is in really tough times, and the referrals are increasing day on day, and we are getting busier and busier. So I can't even think towards the end at the moment, because I don't even know what that looks like, to be honest with you. And one thing I would like to say, and I know probably the issue of funding is going to come up, but it's worth me pointing out that actually this is all happening simultaneous to the times that we usually have at this time of year, which is that contracts come to an end. My job is to make sure the funding comes in. So on top of everything else, we do actually have staff whose contracts run out in March, and that's how little I think sometimes the sector is devalued. You are lucky in our sector to have a 3-year funding pot, but a lot of our staff are year-on-year funded. So it's one of the things that I would like to highlight in terms of actually make sure that we raise the profile of the fact that, as Gina said, it is a lifeline, and we do need to have sustainable funding that is core funding for services like ours.
Thank you so much, Shona, and you're so right, and the interviews definitely resonated with what you're saying. And I remember, and we put this in the film as well, Jess Phillips, if you wanted to come in here, please feel free to. But the perception of the government needs to change, and domestic abuse needs to be core priority, which is what Jess was saying. Did you want to come in here?
Yeah, I mean, that's the biggest call in the beginning was always, we need something to plug the gap in a crisis. And as the lockdowns and the crisis has continued, the call is no longer just, you know, what are we going to do tomorrow? It is, what are we going to do in March? And why is it that the sector repeatedly, I used to, when I worked in the sector myself, I used to want to like scrub off the 31st of March off the calendar, because it's a sort of like some fake date where you either had to spend all of your budget on something that you hadn't needed, but you weren't allowed to fund a member of staff who was providing rape counselling to children for any longer. We cannot continue with year-on-year funding that isn't mainlined from government down to whether that's local authorities or police and crime commissioners. There needs to be, we have 5-year governments. Why can't we have at least 5-year strategies and funding for domestic abuse services? And that will continue. It's never ever the priority there. It's never ever women's health, women's safety. They are never at the top of any minister's inbox. It is always going to be a sort of hand-to-mouth situation until that changes. But it has to change because, for example, coronavirus and the cuts have meant that there's a 2-year waiting list for Crown Court or even magistrates' courts. And so for lots of victims of domestic abuse and sexual violence, they'll be waiting 2 years with an ISVA or an IDVA whose contract runs out in March. So you can't have one part of the system massively backlogged and not provide to the other part of the system.
Sadly, that is the case. And speaking of inboxes, one of the most frequent out-of-office replies I received trying to arrange the interviews during lockdown was some of the CEOs were taking time off to be able to fill in some forms for funding so that they could support their colleagues later on. And it took a very, if I remember correctly, it took a very long time for the funding results to come back. And by which time it was quite late and people were getting exhausted and they didn't have the means to carry on as well. And thank you, Jess, for your contribution to that. Really important. Now I want to move on to Jessica Asato, Head of Public Affairs and Policy for Safe Lies. If you're there, Jess, if you don't mind, there you are, perfect. Because Safe Lies have been one of the key resources that I went to and Carolina went to at the very beginning of this journey, where you did a survey on what the sector felt and where they were at the beginning of the first lockdown. When Karma Nirvana, I know we're going to hear from Natasha Ratu in a minute from Karma Nirvana, but Karma Nirvana was announcing 200% rise in the increase of the calls that they were receiving, whereas Safe Lies were saying 74%, if I remember correctly, of reduction in services. And I know that you have been keeping an eye on these figures and so on. Would you like to update us on the latest as well as saying how you are these days?
Well, hello, and thank you so much for inviting me tonight. And I was just, really pleased to be part of what I think was an incredibly important sort of contribution and documentation, really, of the lived experience of those supporting survivors on the front line. And watching the film felt like it really captured everything that we were hearing from those chief execs and service managers that we were talking to all the way through the first lockdown and all the way through and since. We very quickly, as you said, did a survey of frontline services with quite a strong response, knowing that the very first thing that we would have to do, working in partnership with Jess Phillips and others, would be to make the case for emergency funding. And as you said, we felt we made that case very strongly. We had some really good evidence of the pressures that the frontline were facing, all of which, of course, could be predicted and has been documented previously in crises like this. We know that VORG increases, whether it's Ebola, whether it's Hurricane Katrina, and so we knew that what we would probably have to do is to just make that case. What I guess we didn't quite realise was that we would be making that case for so long before the funding hit the front line, and even though it was incredibly welcome, that delay was not necessary. We shouldn't have had to, really frankly, make the evidence case in the first place because it was all there to see. But of course, incredibly grateful to politicians like Jess Phillips who carried that message through. Now we fast forward and as Shona said, the fact is that the cliff edge for the sector now is March, but that the decisions about staffing start to take place now. And we had a spending review last week, and there was welcome increases in funding, particularly for accommodation-based services as part of the new domestic abuse bill. But even that funding won't cover everything we know. And we know that Women's Aid, for example, have calculated that it's around £183 million required each year to cover just refuge across England and Wales. The government announced 125 million, and that has to cover refuge, move on, safe housing and sanctuary. So even with the funding that has been announced in the spending review, it doesn't give that long-term sustainable security to the sector. And refuge is incredibly important, but it only covers around 20% of the sector. Many organisations provide community-based services, and unfortunately those are not covered in the domestic abuse bill with any new duty or security, and there wasn't a big fund announced for them in the spending review. So it feels very much like we've made the arguments for the emergency and COVID period, but actually what's really required now is that long-term commitment, and that's where we will continue to keep fighting. I just wanted to quickly highlight things that we've been hearing more recently, which we could see through your film, but are very, very acute now. And Shona and everyone else here who works on the front line will know this. But we're hearing, my IDVAs are close to burnout. My IDVAs are hitting 50 cases. Scary. One of the things that we are hearing much louder now is the impact on frontline resilience, well-being, mental health issues of those workers on the front line, who many are survivors themselves. And I think that's one of the things that the government and other agencies fail to take into account, is the fact that so many women have experiences of trauma and then step up to try and make life better for others. But in crises like this, actually they have to try and keep their own mental health in perspective, and that's often not funded. So we know that clinical supervision is rightly quite expensive, but it is often the thing that isn't part of a commissioning contract or service. We also know that there's a highly female workforce, has been referred to. So your child might be in school one day and then they get that dreaded COVID class result and they're back home working once again with you in an environment that is really, really tricky. So once again, the gendered aspect of both the survivors who are being impacted by COVID, but also the frontline workforce, is the thing that I still think many in the government just don't seem to recognise. And then finally, I think it's also services that have been stepping back in this period. Mental health services in particular, we know, almost seem to be sort of pushing access to their services away. And we hear frequently of frontline workers and chief execs saying, what do we do when we get that call at 5 o'clock on a Friday from a survivor who says that they've got suicidal ideation? We try and put in that emergency call to mental health, and they tell us, unfortunately, unless she's tried it already, she doesn't reach our thresholds. And then those frontline workers have to carry that knowledge through with them through the weekend, wondering what's going to happen on Monday and whether they'll still be able to see that client again. And I think that is heartbreaking for both that survivor, but also that support worker who just wants to do the very best for them and get them that immediate support. And so taking those messages back into government, back to Domestic Abuse Commissioner Cole Jacobs has been a brilliant advocate, and obviously politicians like Jess is part of what we do. But thank you once again for inviting me today, and it's just been a pleasure to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jess, and you covered so much ground. I was trying to make links to who next I can link this with, but there are several people who can respond to it. But we really appreciate your contribution to the film, to the project in general, and we'll come back to the next steps at the very end. But to save lives as well, who are saving lives literally, but at the same time providing an overview of what really is going on in the sector, and that sheds light to lots of things that is helpful from so many perspectives. And so I really appreciate that. I'm going to go to Sue here, Sue Penner, because I remember who's the Chief Creative Officer at Rockpool, because her book, The Recovery Toolkit, has been pretty influential in dealing with abusive situations and so on. But perhaps we all need to use the recovery toolkit for ourselves to come to terms with this incredibly global trauma, perhaps. So Sue, did you want to say a few words?
Yeah, can you hear me okay? Yeah. All right. I mean, I think, again, thank you for inviting me, and thank you for the opportunity to speak and to share some experiences with people. I've just been sitting making notes of everybody that's spoken so far, and I'm trying to think how eloquent everybody is sounding, and how I couldn't disagree, or I can't agree more with what everyone's saying. It's all of those things need doing. I think your film is prescient in some ways. I think you got onto the subject of supporting the workers early on, and I think that what we're seeing increasingly, I think as Jess has just said, is a tsunami really of trauma that is happening, a tsunami of trauma for the people that we're supporting, and also for workers. And like other people that have spoken, increasingly I'm talking to frontline workers who are exhausted, who are struggling to cope at home, whose boundaries that they've probably always been really good at putting in place in the workplace are falling apart because they're in their bedrooms working, or in their living rooms working with their children, as everybody said. And I think that the added issue is the fact that as you come up to this date when people don't know whether they're going to have jobs or not. I mean, I think sometimes that the sector is treated by governments and funders a bit like a perpetrator treats someone that's being abused. So yeah, it's an isolated sector. It doesn't get a lot of support from other agencies. And again, Jess has just highlighted the issue around mental health services. I'm ex-mental health service myself. I know how thresholds have got higher and higher and higher because they're also a service that is strapped for cash. That doesn't help us when we're out on the front line trying to work with it. I think that workers are exhausted at the moment, and so the problem with being exhausted is that decision making and making assessment gets harder because your brain is literally tired, and so you're having to double check sometimes the work that you're doing, because you stop being able to trust your instinct because you're so exhausted, and also constantly threatened by this: have I got a job after March? Is there further funding for us? So I think the double whammy of all of this is just not just the increased work, but the actual trauma that people are experiencing. And I worry for the sector. I worry for my friends that are frontline. I'm not frontline anymore, because I see the pain in their faces, and I see their exhaustion and their guilt about not maybe providing the service that they provided previously, because they can't, the guilt at maybe not being present as a parent or partner because they're torn between what's happening for them. And I just think it's really, really worrying. I think I think it would be really interesting to do another film, to be honest, because I think we should keep this on the agenda. That I think that, as someone said earlier today, that this is, what's happening in our sector is happening in other sectors, but other sectors somehow have a bigger public profile, and this is still the sector that people want to ignore, not accept the gender-based violence, not see that it is happening. And I think it is very worrying. Funding undoubtedly, and I would also support, someone said earlier about the money was made available for lots of agencies. That money took months to come through. We were involved in a project with 9 service providers, and from the announcement of the funding being available, it was 6 months before it had gone through all of the hoops and the money was available to deliver the service to the women that needed it. It just seems ridiculous that those things take so long, when we know, as has been pointed out by everybody, that the facts are there. We don't need to look and see that there's a need. The need is absolutely everywhere. So I think for me it's that trauma of our clients, the vicarious trauma that our workers experience at any rate, double impacted now by the traumas of the lack of boundaries, the working from home, and the stress. So I think I am sounding negative, because it feels like there needs to be an injection of something to. The thing that strikes me, people talk about clinical supervision, is that it's not just the clinical supervision we're not getting because it's through a screen, but we don't get those little water cooler moments anymore. We don't get those moments where we bump into someone in the corridor and they put our arm around us and we can just say, we've had a dreadful day. It's the intimacy of that support that is so lost at the moment, that I think kept a lot of people going, really. So yeah, I think
thank you, Sue. That's a really honest account, and in fact, even within the university sector, I'm sure my colleagues who are currently in the meeting will appreciate what you're saying. Even though we're not necessarily dealing with trauma or vicarious trauma in our jobs, it's quite difficult. And I think you as the domestic abuse sector has experienced that, what it means to work from home and to bring trauma to home. And to an extent, universities even are, we wouldn't think that, are experiencing similar things. Thank you so much for your contributions. The next film, absolutely, I'm going to come back to Carolina on that in a minute, and we have some plans, so definitely. But as you were talking about what it means for frontline workers, in addition to Gina, we had from the Pandora project in Norfolk, we had Shelley Whitby. I think Shelley is with us. Shelley, if you don't mind joining us, or Tracy as well, CEO of Pandora project, is here. So either of you would like to comment on it. And we wanted to, hi Tracy, we wanted to start the film with the experience of Shelley, because she works with children as well, and in domestic abuse situations, and she was reflecting on how helpless she felt. So Tracy, did you want to come in, or Shelley, if she's there as well?
Yeah, so we thought it was really important to include the voice of our children's worker in this project. And I'd like to thank Shelley for being part of that, because she was kind of railroaded into it. So thank you, Shelley. And thank you, Eylem, for inviting us to be part of it. So as Shona said, the important thing for me has been the mental health of the team, which has been a real challenge to work remotely. In the first lockdown, the children's team found it really difficult knowing those young people were trapped at home with an abuser and had nobody looking out for them. And some parents were finding it extremely hard to manage challenging behaviours, but the children's team just felt helpless. So funding wise, again, to pick up on the funding subject, we pick up a lot of work from statutory agencies, but we don't get funded by them. So we're also funded more or less year to year. We have a few projects that are a bit longer than that, but lots of funding year to year, which is not only another stress for us as a service, but also for support workers knowing if they'll have a job. And on one occasion, we had one children's worker, and we had a month to go before her contract ran out, before the funding ran out, and we found the funding to keep her going for another year. But it was such a close call. She'd actually got another job lined up, ready, and it was the only children's worker in the area, and that was really stressful for everybody. So COVID funding has been great. There's been lots of it around, but it's been very short term, and the impact of COVID and lockdown is going to have repercussions for longer than March next year. So it's been great to have a lot of funding about, but 6-month funding, you know how it's really difficult to employ somebody for 6 months. Those workers, really, we need them. You know, we need them for long term, not 6 months. Can't really do a great deal of work. So I'd like to think some good has come out of all of this in highlighting the plight of women and children living in an abusive environment, and the governments and other agencies now can't ignore that. And violence against women and girls should be on every agenda everywhere, and why isn't it? So I'd like to think that things will turn around after this, but who knows?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Tracy, for your reflections. And this is probably true. I mean, one of the things that I remembered from my interview with, again, Jess Phillips, and Jess, if you wanted to come in again, that'd be great. But it was Jess meeting, was it in Liverpool, Jess? I can't remember, a charity with only 3 key workers who were doing taking 750 cases in total, so 250 cases each, which you called as madness, which is pretty much true. It's too much to take on.
Yeah, I mean, the level of, I mean, compared to your average social work caseload, the domestic abuse sector has always run much higher, bigger caseloads, because there just simply isn't the resource. And I think that what Tracy was saying is really important, is that so many referrals will come from basically a sort of passing the buck of other services that where their thresholds have become so high. I mean, the government ministers during the domestic abuse bill kept saying to me that I didn't need to fight for specialist children's services because that would be dealt with by children's social care in those cases, to which I asked the minister, had she ever made a children's social care referral, because I very much suggest that she hasn't, if she thinks that the average child living with domestic abuse would ever be able to be seen in those circumstances. But what we have seen over this crisis is, yes, fewer workers taking on greater numbers. And to put it simply, it is dangerous. It is dangerous for the staff. It is dangerous for the service. It comes with risk. Bear in mind that every domestic homicide undertakes a review that seeks to find blame elsewhere, out with the perpetrator. And it is very, very difficult for domestic abuse services to continue to be taking on the referrals that they need to take on, when the staff have ridiculously high caseloads. But we are a sector, I say we because I still consider myself to be part of it, we have a sector who is incapable of saying no. I mean, it's like 5 to 5 on a Friday afternoon. On a bank holiday weekend, someone turns up with their bags and you've got your coat on ready to leave, and you're in it for the long haul until you found them a place. And that's just the way it is. And sometimes I think we give our labour away for free too easily in this particular sector. And demands should be made of social services, for example, where referrals are made.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that reminds me of the other issue of immigrant women, which the domestic abuse bill needs to cover, but has not necessarily covered it yet. And which takes me to the interview. Thank you so much, Jess. To the interview that I've done with Paisley. If I could bring you in, from Iranian and Kurdish Women's Rights Organization, an ambassador and activist. You will have known her activism through her amazing TED Talk. If you haven't seen it, I would completely encourage you to see it as well. Paisley, if you're there, if you could join us, because in the film and in the interviews that we've done, you were talking about how, we weren't prepared for what was to come, and all women needed to be helped out. All people, well, you were saying disproportionately to men, all women had to be helped out. So Paisley, did you want to come in? Are you with us? I can see.
I'm there. Can you see me?
Excellent. Perfect.
Good evening. Hi, Eylem. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me and inviting me here this evening. It's been an honor to work with yourself and colleagues on this film and contribute. As you were saying, as a survivor, actually, I joined this sector during lockdown. So I started my job with the Iranian and Kurdish Women's Rights Organization back in June. And I've really been able to gain insight into what colleagues are dealing with every day, although we're working from home and, hearing cases. It has been quite overwhelming to see, as you mentioned in your introduction, the way government has been dealing with domestic abuse, especially concerning migrant women. It's been quite triggering, actually, as a woman who migrated to the UK as a young girl. It has made me very sad to know that the support that women from certain backgrounds can get because of their status is actually very little, meaning that they are exposed to more risk. So that has been really, really concerning. And I think there was just so much more that needed to be done during the lockdown. As I said, especially the first one, we did see the national campaign, which again wasn't originally released in all languages. And that to me reiterated the fact that, these messages aren't for every woman, they're not for every girl. And that just really is heartbreaking, because we can't discriminate when it comes to abuse. So for me, that was a real shocker, especially as somebody who has experienced this type of abuse, and just thinking and, you know, really being able to think about how these women are feeling during these periods. It was really, really triggering and overwhelming feeling of sadness to think about. But it also made me have an insight into how incredible colleagues are in this sector and just how amazingly hardworking they are. You know, the meetings that are held weekly, the conversations that are happening, it's such an honor to be amongst the group of people who are so hardworking and so passionate. You know, the stories we're hearing tonight about people working from home with children and the sacrifices they're having to make sure that women and girls are safe. It really is very heartwarming, and I'm so proud to work in this sector amongst colleagues. And thank you so much, Eylem, for putting this film together for us and sharing this, because it is something that people don't see. This is incredibly hard on colleagues, and there's so much work being done.
Thank you so much, Paisley. That's an amazing reflection as well, as always. And we're really proud to have you on board in the project and in general, but also in the film as well. And one thing that you did allude to, I was thinking, should we save hope for the end? Because Hope Meetings and the Digital Art Project by Hope has been defined, as you will have heard in the film, by Roxanne as well, Roxanne Khan from Harm Network, as the silver lining of coronavirus, of the pandemic. So what I would like to do is to bring in Meena Kumari, who is the founder and director of Hope Training. So thank you, Paisley, for joining us. So Meena, did you want to, we can have a whole session on the importance and the amazing energy that was created by Hope Meetings every week. So if you would like to come in, that would be great.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm really sorry, I'm hiding in my child's bedroom, and that's why you can see the giraffe in the background. So apologies. So thank you so much for having me. I'll be really quick. It's just to say thank you to all the women that are on the call today that's been part of the Hope Network. It really was put together for practitioners on the front line to come together and have that safe space, but really targeting and thinking about the impact it's having within Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities. And really, out of the calls, the Digital Art Project really grew. Hopefully by the end of the year, we will be at 50 women, and by next year, kind of 100 women. And, you know, Paisley and April and Natasha and, you know, Yasmin, some of the other women that are on the call today have been showcased in that. And just listening to what some of the other speakers have been saying about the impact on frontline workers, you know, I cannot emphasize enough when I've spoken to frontline workers about the impact that it had on them, that real kind of notion of we don't really know where we're going. We need that long-term kind of sustainable funding, and we really need kind of those who are in kind of those roles that do have that position of kind of power and to make that difference, to really listen to what the frontline sector is saying. So thank you so much for having me. And yeah, that's it. That's from me. That's from Hope. And, you know, apologies, I have a monkey and a giraffe in the background.
No, this is good. That is good. Thank you so much, Meena. And we know that the sector, everybody in the sector really appreciated the idea of getting together. And in one of the interviews in particular with Natasha Ratu, who is the CEO of Karma Nirvana, if I could bring her in, that would be great. She was talking about how the sector through these calls, and also to an extent through, even though its focus was on Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities, and within the lockdown, within the COVID context, it really brought the entire sector together, said Natasha. So Natasha, did you want to come in and tell us about your experience of it? And also, Karma Nirvana was facing quite challenging figures at the very beginning and in the middle of the, is continuously facing really high call volumes as well. And you're working in an organization which not only deals with domestic abuse, but different kinds of abuse, including honor-based abuse as well. So welcome.
Thank you, Eylem. Well, firstly, just to say a huge thank you to you for
allowing us to be part of this massively powerful and raw film. It's been incredible because it really does reflect the sentiment of how the helpline team at Carmen Barn have been feeling. But just going on to the point that you made about sector solidarity, I don't know whether it's because we're outside of London and we're not so connected in ways that some of the more local London organisations have been, but this virtual space has been incredible to really bring us together. And the sisterly solidarity of the organisations across the board in the Borg sector has been really, really felt. So we've massively appreciated that. And as Roxanne said, it absolutely has been the silver lining of the pandemic. The weekly calls that we're chimed into, working out how we can manage and reflect on ways to deal with the welfare issues that this pandemic has thrown up for those people that are on the front line. From our perspective at Carmen Havana, we deliver the National Honour-Based Abuse Helpline, and all the staff are now working remotely at home in their bedrooms or working, in their living rooms, some with children, some that have had to isolate because a school bubble has burst, and it's just thrown up so many different things that we've all had to chip in. In fact, today I've been interviewing for another call handler for the helpline. It's not something I would normally do, but the staff that would are there on the front line dealing with the extraordinary levels of demand that we've been dealing with. And with that said, and touching upon the points that Mina and Paisley spoke about how there are organisations out there that provide specialist services, and some of those have been overlooked. Honour-based abuse is a prime example of that. As Paisley said, initially the government didn't have literature and the campaign on domestic abuse in additional languages. It wasn't speaking to the people that we support, and it wasn't reflective of the additional barriers and hurdles that they face. And in honesty, when the lockdown started, we didn't expect that we were going to have huge call volumes, because the majority of people that we work with or that call the helpline have multiple perpetrators. They were already living in a lockdown before the lockdown, so it's incredibly difficult for them. But the fact that call volumes rose in the way that they did was just so revealing of how desperate people have been during this time. We've had some real concerns out of missed groups, so we've not heard from children as often when we compare it to data from last year, showing that we've got some real hidden and vulnerable invisible groups out there. So there has to be a focus on really how do we reach those people meaningfully. And also when we talk about forced marriage cases have dropped, and again, perhaps another silver lining of the lockdown around travel restrictions and wedding restrictions that are in place. But let's not be complacent and think that these aren't going to happen. These are going to happen at some point. So we'll have that rise. So we're dealing with a crisis now, but we've also got to be prepared for the road that's ahead of us in terms of the issues, in terms of the funding, in terms of all the challenges that we have in this sector. So just really wanted to raise those things, and again say a huge thank you. And if there is another film, we'd be delighted to be involved.
Thank you so much, Natasha. It's been great to have your perspective on this, and it's been quite a lot. 200% increase in the calls. It's that you've received. It's quite a lot to take on, and you have been offering different kinds of strategies, which were quite important in dealing with the issue as well. I remember you, for example, talking to me about how you were able to get access to the victims, survivors who went to their GP appointments because they had to be going in alone, so you could reach out to them and so on. So there were lots of things in your interview that we would have loved to include in the film, but it's editing is as Carolina will come tell us in a little while, I hope. It's quite a crazy thing, but we will come to you again for the next project, or it's hopefully an expanding project. Everybody mentioned Roxanne, so I would like to bring in Dr. Roxanne Khan so that people can see her and say hello to her. And she is the director of Harm Network, and she's a senior lecturer in forensic psychology at the University of Central Lancashire. So Roxanne, hello.
Hello, I'm just trying to get my camera working. Hopefully you can see me.
Yeah, perfect.
Hello, what a wonderful opening that was, Eylem. Thank you very much. Yes, I want to thank you wholeheartedly, Eylem and Carolina, for the film and inviting me today. And a big hello to everybody else in the room. I'm looking at everybody in the room, and there's so many names that I can see, people that I know who I've always wanted to meet. So it's an absolute privilege. Now, I made a throwaway remark in the film about the coronavirus silver lining, and it keeps coming back, which at least it's optimistic. And I think in a nutshell, that's what it is for me. I mean, let's face it, 2020 has been a barrage of back-to-back. It's just a global, national, local, community and personal trauma. Just when things seem to hit rock bottom, something else happened. I mean, we will look back at this time and we will gasp that we got through this. You know, just catastrophic events after another. So yes, we have to accept, and I think this is what Natasha was alluding to, that it is bleak, and we have to, in many ways, accept this. The UN, for example, projected in a 20-year projection, sorry, that coronavirus will lead to a 1/3 reduction in efforts to end violence against women and girls, and it will cause irreparable damage, societal damage, that's going to ripple through generations. It's not just us that are experiencing it. Life has changed forever. Saying that, and it might not sound like it, but I am actually an optimist. And I think that in many ways, for me, I have to be. So it's the silver lining that I'm going to focus on. And I think this film is a perfect example of that. It's absolutely wonderful. First of all, I get to go to a film launch in my pajamas. So that's also good. I get to see Mina's giraffe with a good thing. I get to see Jess Phillips, who I think she looks like she's in a goth club in the 1980s. So that's also good. And I think that when we look back on this, the word lifeline is the other important thing. I'm an academic researcher, so I'm the director of the Honour Abuse Research Matrix. So I spend a lot of time reading and listening to people and being quiet. Actually, I'm a very loud introvert. So I listen to people, and so there's a lot of time spent ruminating. What this silver lining is to me is an opportunity to have linked with people that I never thought that I'd have the opportunity to link with and have the time to reflect on what people are saying. Yes, we're all exhausted. Yes, we're tired, but I've got time to listen to you because of this online capacity that we have. In many ways, it's ironed out the pathway to people that I don't think would have existed before. As a researcher, you know, we're notoriously either spiky and that's because we're too busy trying to hide our feelings. And I have to admit, you know, I've been very emotional every time I watch the film and I lit the trailer, for example, and Shona speaks, and I get very emotional about that. I noticed April on Twitter commented that she felt very emotional, and I think it's almost allowed people who are reserved just to, I wouldn't say break down, but just be honest and open about how we are feeling. So for me, that's one of the silver linings. Now, another thing, I've met so many amazing women and men during the last few months. Obviously, Eylem, I can't thank you enough, and Carolina, but I've also got to speak to Mina Kumari, and Hope meetings have just been an absolute. It's the way we're talking is like we'd all met in the back of a pub and we're just all talking, and it's just very honest and raw. Listening to the fact that we've got somebody at the front like Jess Phillips who's willing to stand the ground, Natasha, Ratu Karmanovana, and Paisley, I just have to say, you're the reason I get up in the morning, and I have done for many years, so thank you. But that's not for all the quiet women, the people that are introverted, that don't speak. It's all the people who aren't speaking as well. I have so much respect for you, and it's far easier to speak truth to power when you're in the company of genuine, tenacious and dynamic women that were represented in the film. So thank you very much. And I'm getting emotional again, so I'll stop it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Roxanne. It's been a pleasure. I think the silver lining of doing this film for us has been meeting you and everyone in this room, really, the presenters as well. And yes, and also speaking of hope meetings, I think there's another hope meeting coming up. I don't know if Mina, you wanted to put that in the comments so that people who are in this call who didn't know about hope meetings but who might have seen it in the film will join us as well in there. They have been an absolute pleasure to follow as well. But thank you so much, Roxanne. And one of the other good things about hope meetings it was me meeting Karen Evans, who was the past chair of North East Hampshire Domestic Abuse Forum. So Karen, I would like to bring you in if you don't mind, because I remember having a conversation with you which went on for about an hour or even a little longer, and that was the first interview, and I was thinking, oh my, this is going to go on for, you know, if all the interviews are like this, we're going to have a very big project, which we do, which is great. So did you want to share your reflections with us about the film or the lockdown and your experiences of working in the domestic abuse sector?
Yeah, sure, thank you. And I'm not always known for my brevity. I suppose I'd really like to pick up on some of the positive things that are being said. As it's been mentioned with both Jessies actually in the chat bar and also sort of talking really about the way that the services have responded. It's been absolutely amazing, because my role is all about pulling all the agencies together, because what we want is a coordinated response. So wherever people need to get help, you know, they're either able to get access that straight away, or people know exactly who to signpost. And I think one of the positive things about the COVID situation is a lot more links are being put in place than might have been otherwise. And the opportunity to do training has been amazing. So with the Hope Cause, but also Shown, Aurora New Dawn have been delivering a lot of stalking training sessions. And whereas in the past, you might have only been able to reach perhaps 16, 20 people, you know, getting out to so many more people. And I mean, the kind of linking up has been amazing. I say with the Hope Cause, you know, people speak, you know, speaking to people from all different walks of life and all across the country, you know, that we wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. But I think, yeah, for the actual people delivering the frontline services, I think this has been really, really tough time. I think they've done amazingly. But, you know, not just the frontline deliverers, but also to kind of support, so like the CEOs, all the people at the top of the organisation who are having to manage their own situations alongside trying to support all the staff. And it's been really, truly inspirational, really, what people have achieved. And also, in some ways, the timing's been quite good with the domestic abuse bill, because obviously, if this had been discussed in normal times, the bill, it might not have had the profile and the kind of real impetus to get all that funding in place, and, you know, to really kind of make changes and things. So, yeah, some of the positive things, but yeah, I don't think, as everyone's kind of alluded to, I think actually, you know, support for frontline workers, you know, really, really difficult, and hats off to everybody who's been managing that. They've done an absolutely brilliant job.
Oh, thank you so much for your reflections, and I'm sure everyone in this room, I know some people had to leave, they will have enjoyed hearing that, and the positives are important. And one comment, I haven't been following on the comments too much, trying to engage with the conversation, but I can see Dr. Sarah Hansen has written something around rural counties such as Norfolk, and for that reason, and then the who are often excluded from services due to multiple barriers, as she put it in the chat, and for that reason, I think it would be great to bring in firstly Reese Lloyd, who's the media and PR officer for Leeway Domestic Violence and Abuse Services from Norfolk, and maybe following that might bring in, if she's still around, Amanda Moore, Senior Policy Officer, Vulnerability Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner for Norfolk, and a domestic abuse champion. But Reese, let's hear your views first, and everyone will probably say, oh, there is a man for the first time, this is great. We did interview men as well, but we will come to that later on in the larger part of the project.
Yes, first of all, thank you for having me as part of the project, and it's also great to just listen to everyone's experiences tonight. Obviously, I'm quite a positive person, so like before, I will also focus on some positives, and I guess kind of in my role, it's really about promoting the work that Leeway does, the services that we have, and kind of just getting our message out there, and that's really been all the more important throughout the pandemic. And I think really it's been so positive to see the response of the local community. Like links have been made with organisations and businesses that we've perhaps never had contact with before. I know we had a wonderful donation of food parcels from Norwich City Football Club, who are usually quite difficult to get hold of. So it's been fantastic to kind of see just different people kind of coming forward and offering their support, and just generally speaking as well. I know it's been a very difficult time for a lot of people, but even just simple things, just such as like sharing a Facebook post with information about accessing support, just that all makes a difference. And I think really the kind of challenge now is kind of maintaining that, because whilst hopefully COVID will obviously disappear, domestic abuse won't. And I think one bit that really sort of struck me in the film was where I think someone referred to domestic abuse as being a pandemic in itself. And I think that's really what we've got to communicate in the coming months and years as well. And we've got to continue campaigning. It's obviously great news about the domestic abuse bill, but it's a case of it can go further, and we must continue to kind of really make sure that our voices are heard, and also the voices of the survivors and the people that we're currently supporting are heard. And we've just got to really kind of continue to kind of better ourselves and kind of better the situation that we sort of find ourselves in. Obviously, funding is a real issue, and it's always one of those kind of issues that always kind of comes up whenever you talk about domestic abuse with someone else in the sector. And I'm sure really the toll of the pandemic has left many people feeling tired and exhausted, as we've kind of heard tonight. But I think sometimes it's good just to hear the positives. And I know certainly at Leeway, I'm sort of in charge of putting out sort of staff updates, and I usually try to include things about feedback and positives, and just to kind of make people feel like actually, you know what, the work we're doing is appreciated, and we're making a difference, because ultimately we are a lifeline to these people. And you know, I think sometimes it's easy to get caught up in all the negatives and perhaps be overly hard on yourself, but I think everyone's doing a fantastic job, and it's fantastic to be part of this, and hopefully be part of any future projects too.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your reflections. And it is a massive task that you have been doing within Norfolk as well as Leeway, and your work is definitely appreciated at national levels, not just local levels as well. If I may say so, given the Norfolk context, maybe Amanda Moore, Senior Policy Officer Vulnerability from the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner for Norfolk, to say a couple of words, only because I would like to acknowledge that the Police and Crime Commissioner for Norfolk, 3 colleagues have essentially joined us from the interview. I think we might have lost Amanda, or maybe not, maybe she's back. And finally, after that, I would, after Amanda's speech, I'll briefly go to our MP, Labour MP, Virendra Sharma, who's been waiting really patiently, I think, was very kindly agreed to provide a reflection as well. But first, let's hear from Amanda. Hello, Amanda, if you're there.
Hello, Eylem. Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Brilliant. You won't be able to see me because my tech is very old, and we can't get this kind of equipment on our work laptops, so I'm using an old iPad. However, I think it's I would echo what Roxana Khan has been saying tonight about the hard work and the passionate frontline workers, and they are women and men, and the optimism and the opportunity that we've all had to talk through your film about how it's been working in the world of domestic abuse and helping and supporting those frontline services. The whole Office of the Police and Crime Commission for Norfolk have been working tirelessly with a whole partnership And we are looking at innovative ways of working with our health, our council colleagues, our police colleagues, victim services, to ensure that we made sure that that transition into the digital method for helping and supporting those specialists, we did it in the most agile and innovative way we possibly could. And I can hear and understand what everyone is saying about the funding pots and how they are short term. But we have been being that optimism, we have enabled a working practice to change and innovate and get to talk to people quicker. For such things like we've enabled chat functions with Tracy from Pandora was talking earlier, one-to-one counselling through tablets and allowing victims to have that access as well, communicating through many digital media platforms that we never as partners ever contemplated using in the first place. And what I would say is we've been able to work a lot quicker than we've ever worked before as a partnership. And yes, that has its toll on individuals working non-stop, because I think many people here, even going for a cup of tea and you come back and there's another 20, 30, 40 emails, or you've missed some calls, you actually think to yourself, should I have gone for that cup of tea? It's a human reaction, isn't it? And I think what your film's allowed, it's brought forward the trauma that's been described for individuals taking forward their work into their homes, and it's about supporting those agencies and supporting those workers going forward now. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you so much for your contributions. And I think the one thing that I remember vividly from the interview we did together was this idea of multi-agency working and working in partnership, the sector getting together and working with different stakeholders, if you like, to deliver really rapidly, as you say, in an agile way, the best possible support that we could provide to people who were in need and at the most unusual and challenging of circumstances. So we really appreciate. And if those colleagues or those people in the participants list who may not know, but because University of East Anglia is based in Norfolk, and it's very close to my heart and so many of us our hearts, so hence the Norfolk connection. So but the work that you're doing has resonated at national level, and we know that as well. So thank you very much, Amanda. And finally, last but not least, if you don't mind me presenting Labour MP Randra Sharma. Hello. To say a few words of reflection before I bring in Carolina back and maybe respond to some of the comments or questions before everyone leaves, so bringing it to a close. Welcome.
Thank you very much. First, let me thank you organizing and everybody else involved in it for this evening. Normally, you watch the film, you come out and say, what a great film it was. But now you feel it, watching the short film, that how painful this film was, which is causing distress, pain in your heart and mind, and also looking at how best we can support those people. I'm involved in domestic violence issues for over 40 years when it was not even considered in my borough, London Borough of Ealing. And the organization Black Sisters, we have set it up in those days. And as a councillor and the chair of the housing committee, we funded that group in those days in the middle 80s. So that's where our commitment comes. And when it was a taboo amongst the Asian community, whether domestic violence even exists in the society, even today, we are still facing that issue when it comes to domestic violence. It is the mainstream issue. This is not an issue in isolation. I campaign it and I still support it, that this should be taken as part and parcel of the society today. It is when we are talking about homelessness, we are talking about unemployment, we are talking about human rights, we need to talk about domestic violence along with it. And the system need to look at seriously how we can provide the resources and the support, not only the workers to provide the service, but also those who are the victims of the society. I call everybody who are working in this field. I appreciate and salute the way they face the criticism in the society when they are questioned whether they are or violence, the sufferings they face. I'm along with them. I support them, and I like to carry on supporting all those individuals in my area, or certainly wherever it will through the parliament. My colleagues are on this joint as well, and I'm quite confident that along with, we all come together to put pressure on national government and the local authorities to provide services, resources, but also in the society we accept it. Once again, thank you very much. As I was given a minute or two, I would like to share the experiences, but I look forward to those groups who are already working with, but also those who I have not worked yet, to work with them to make a link so that we can have a society which is a domestic violence free society. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. What a really great and positive reflection to leave us with. Thank you so much, Randra Sharma, for your reflection and for being a representative and ambassador to eliminate any kind of domestic violence in the Parliament. So we will look forward to connecting you with those colleagues who you may not have started working yet, and we will be very happy to work with you as well in any initiative that you support or you start as well. Thank you very much. So finally, last but definitely not least, I would like to bring Carolina Pelican, my co-director, to say a few words as a reflection, as closing remarks, if you like. And we will be also interested in letting you know, those of you who remained, and we started with about 66 people and there are still 48 people here. So kudos to all of you for staying till the end. So really appreciate it. But Carolina, if I may bring you in, if you would like to say a few words to reflect on your experience of working in the film and any other messages that you would like to give before we tell everyone what the next steps are.
I get the last words. I'd rather, well, before I say something about the film, there was a very interesting question in the audience. Unfortunately, I experienced a technical issue, so I got kicked out for 2 seconds and my chat history was deleted. I remember it was from Lucy. And Lucy, if you're still there, I don't know if you like to ask the question yourself, because it was a really, really important one that I think Shauna already replied a little bit in the chat, but maybe others have something to say as well. So I don't know if Lucy, you want to say something?
Let's see, I'm just trying to find it.
It was very much.
I think this was about funding, right? Was this the one about from Lucy about? Oh, yeah, Lucy is here. What can we as individuals do to help? Apart from just providing, you know, funding and donations and so on, what else can we do?
Exactly. I don't know if there is anyone from our lovely contributors who either can respond to it in the chat, as Shauna did kindly, or wants to say anything, because I really, really think Lucy and I had the same question all along when I was working on the film and editing it. Like, what can we do? What can I do? Apart from the typical things that, you know, donations or kind of sharing information. But yeah, I think again, Shauna replied very nicely. And if no one else has something to say, I can reflect. It was again, as mentioned before, a very humbling experience, and I thank you so much, Eylem, for bringing me really on board this adventure that started with oh, I have these 27 interviews that I did for my research. Let's make a film. And I think it is really, filmmaking is a really, really powerful tool. I mean, I am a documentary filmmaker with a strong focus on these social problems and issues that really needs like really shedding a light on those issues, let's say, and giving a voice to people and contributors and organizations who should be in the focus, but unfortunately in our society never are or rarely are. So I really thought it was a very inspiring project. I really thank everyone involved. I cannot thank you enough. I mean, you've kindly been saying in the chat and all along of these the interviews and presentations right now, everyone is saying thank you. No, I really think that we are very grateful to you that you shared your experiences, especially again Shelley and Gina. I don't know if you're still there. Like it has been really amazing, because I think it's such filmmaking again as this powerful tool can really show and share the emotion that is behind, and it's something that we all can connect to. And I mean, lockdown and COVID and all this really strange experience that we had in 2020, we can connect on this human level, on this human with this human experience, which are these emotions of lockdown, and we can really share it. And just thinking that you continue to work and do the incredible work that you do, taking traumatic experiences of other people, of victims and survivors, to your own homes, is just incredible, because you've been doing this and you've continued to do this selflessly. That's the thing. And I think everyone said and continue to say that in the interviews, what kind of work and what effect and tolls it had on you as well. And I think that's what we wanted to kind of reflect on with this little film that we did. And it is a really, I feel, small contribution to the very big discussion that is behind. It was really hard and difficult to make a film, I think, in lockdown, and we would have done it probably differently if we weren't in lockdown, because I mean, as Eylem said at the beginning, we made Gina a director of photography. She is our director of photography, basically. A lot of images that you see were contributed by her shooting some things with her mobile phone, which was really amazing, an amazing experience as well. To do this and to find in the editing room, to find a narrative arc as well, was, I mean, it was a little bit of a challenge, but again, I think the film that we made with a lot of passion and a lot of heart, I really hope that it speaks to a lot of people, that it speaks to you. I'm very grateful to see that the contributors who watched the film, it really resonates with you. It really resonates with a lot of experiences of other people, of other frontline workers in the sector. So yeah, I'm really grateful to have been part of it.
Oh, thank you, Carolina, and I'm grateful to you for all your contributions to the film, and it's nice to be able to say that publicly in addition to saying it on a daily basis. And it's been a true pleasure working with you on this as a filmmaker who is committed to providing social change through storytelling. That's been absolutely wonderful to share that experience with you. And just want to finish off by saying that Carolina and I, and a couple of other colleagues as well, have been talking about using the interviews from the project as podcasts, as different mini videos. We will be in touch with you on that, and potentially a radio program might come out of it. So the images or the sounds that the interviews we couldn't use, we are hoping to use those as well. And I'm looking at Carolina to say, just to nod. I'm not letting her go, I think. I think she's going to be in. And the mere fact that you've all done this voluntarily, and this was a zero budget film, literally zero budget film, has been absolutely amazing. I just would like to say that what you have achieved, all as contributors and as participants today, as we are leaving visible evidence behind, to capture this moment, this experience, this range of emotion, the new emotions, new feelings that we have been acquiring because of COVID, and maybe thanks to COVID, if not as a result of it. So as an academic, I feel quite responsible for capturing those moments, and I'm hoping that this recording as well of this session will also remain as visible evidence. And that brings me to the end to say thank you to Professor Sarah Barrow to open the session, to say a few words and to introduce the session, and to Jess Phillips. I know she's left a little while ago, but wasn't that great for her to join us, and all the contributors who have spoken today, as well as my colleagues who within literally less than 2 weeks notice decided that we could turn this into an online launch. And so huge thanks to make this event online event happen. So Rachel Watkins and Tanner Barnes and Megan and their team as well. Thank you very much. And also Laura Potts for dealing with media inquiries and doing a brilliant press release. So huge thanks to everyone. And I also want to thank our person from My Clear Text who has very kindly done the captions for this event. So, and the film, Carolina has very kindly captioned the film as well, so it's fully accessible, we are proud to say. And what you can do afterwards is please do get in touch with us if you wanted to share more experiences, but also please feel free to share the film, the link to the film, with anyone and everyone you think might be interested. So thank you so much all, and that will bring us to a close. Thanks for joining us.